What's up, y'all? We're here for another Life on the Vine. My name's Matt. I'm the worship pastor here. And today we're going to talk about when God is confusing. I'm a real big fan of science fiction. Two of my favorite book series are the Dune series and a lesser-known series called Book of the New Sun. And one of the things that both of these series do is they throw a lot of terms and character names and ideas at you, and they don't explain what they mean. They just sort of throw it out there and expect you to wade through it. And Jesus actually did this a lot. In a lot of his parables and harder teachings, he would throw out this big truth bomb, but it would be sort of obscure and difficult to understand. And sometimes Jesus would explain himself, and after all of the people left, he would turn to his disciples and he'd say, okay, this is what this means. And sometimes he wouldn't. And John 6 is an example of one of these times. So we're going to read from John 6, 51 through 58 and 66 through 69. Jesus is telling all of these disciples who have come to hear him, I am the living bread that came from heaven. Whoever eats of this bread will live forever, and the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. And the Jews among them disputed, saying, how can this man give us flesh to eat? So Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood will have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them. Just as the living Father sent me, I live because of the Father. Whoever eats of me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like that which your ancestors ate, and they died. But one who eats this bread will live forever. And so a bunch of the disciples, they turn away in disgust. And it goes on to say, because many of the disciples turned back and no longer went with him, Jesus went to the 12 and said, will you go away also? And Simon Peter said, Lord, to whom can we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God. So Jesus comes to the big group of people who come to hear him, who John calls the Jews, and he says something that's really hard for them to hear. He tells them to eat his flesh and to drink his blood. And one reason why this is such a big deal is because the Jews had really strict dietary restrictions. And so for Jesus to suggest something like this cannibalistic act is not only something that's really gross, it is heretical. And so they don't stick around. They go ahead and bug out. And Jesus doesn't qualify himself. He has every chance to say, oh, well, this is figurative, or no, you got to understand it like this, or whatever. Jesus doesn't say any of that. Jesus just leaves it and lets them leave. And kind of like the science fiction books I was talking about, he just sort of leaves us hanging and expects us to wade in these terms and things that we don't understand. And he asks the disciples to simply trust him. But he has a purpose. Later in the Last Supper, Jesus' meaning is revealed. And now it all makes sense. We're called to eat of his flesh and drink of his blood in this way at the table. And that's how we're to have life in us. That's how we receive the life of the world. And just like Paul says, we see now through a mirror darkly, but in the future we'll see full. We'll see everything in its fullness. And so right now we see in this glass, this mirror, dimly lit. And we're in the period where Jesus just says, eat my flesh and drink my blood. and then we're sort of waiting for the reveal. In the Book of the New Sun, the first or the second book that I talked about, Gene Wolfe doesn't actually resolve anything at any point. He just leaves us waiting, and it's kind of unsatisfactory, although albeit very interesting. But in Dune, it pays off. If you read through and wait all the terms, eventually you kind of learn what he's talking about. The mystery is revealed, and you get to enjoy what was in the book. And you realize, oh man, this was so much better than if he had just done a bunch of info dump in the beginning of the book. And that's kind of how it is in our discipleship. God might not be making a lot of sense to you right now. You may be reading the scriptures, and you might be kind of lost. You might be listening for God's voice, and you might not quite be understanding what God is telling you to do. Sometimes the Christian life doesn't make full sense. But when Jesus was talking and explaining about the body and the blood, he left it up to the disciples to trust him. So it's incumbent upon us now to trust God, even when we don't understand him. Okay, y'all, just a reminder, we got the chili cook-off coming up this week, and it's going to be really, really great. John will be sending out reminders to all of you who have signed up, and we're just going to show up and eat chili and have a great time. I'm one of the judges, so I'm really excited to eat all of the stuff that you guys have prepared, and it's going to be super fun. So make sure you don't miss it.